What's up everybody, my name is Vindrake from Cat's Cozy Games. In this tutorial, we're going to go over every step of the way to get you through the LVAge, from making your first single block machines to getting your first electronic blast furnace. We're going to take you through step by step so that you can glide your way through this entire quest page, which looks very overwhelming at first, but don't worry, you can absolutely conquer this, and we'll show you how. Alright, so we've got a little area prepared for all of our single block LV machines that we're going to have pretty soon. I have brought piping here, which you will not have initially. It is Potin pipe, but you will be able to make this very soon. This is really nice for transporting steam. We have steam from one of our previous setups in a previous tutorial. We've got all of these advanced solar boilers, which are really good for making steam. We've also got a Railcraft low pressure boiler tank, where we're just using blaze rods from our mob farm, which was over here. But however you're getting the steam, you're going to need a decent amount of it, enough to be able to support several basic steam turbines. And so by the time you get to LV, and this is like the last quest in Steam, you've made your first steam turbine. Hopefully you've made a decent amount of LV circuits to start yourself out. I do recommend batch crafting these, as many as you possibly can. Some people will go the extra mile and make 64, but at least 16, 32 I do recommend. And that is a bit of grinding, but it's well worth it. And so one of the common questions when people get to LV is they ask the question, what machine do I make first? Because you come here and like, this is a massive quest page. We're going to break it down for you because this looks overwhelming initially, but it's actually not that bad. My initial recommendation is that you focus on the large quests, with the exception of this one. Don't worry about getting ready for tier 2 MV. Don't worry about this aluminium ingot. We're not going to get to that for a while. But almost any other large quest is pretty safe to go ahead and get done. Maybe I would ignore the electrolyzer for now. But yeah, one of the first things that I do is I make a wire cutter. Basic wire mill. This is going to save you so many ingots. But first things first, before you even make that, you got your first steam turbine. Let's go ahead and place this. And I like to kind of place it in this orientation. We'll just do one for now. This little side here with the circle is the output of the steam turbine. So you can use your wrench, you can turn that any way you want. But we want it facing this direction. And I'm going to use some tin cable. I'm going to use 2x tin cable. I'll show you why in just a second. We'll explain the concept of amperage. All of these are going to be 32 EU LV cables, but the amperage is different between each of these. So 8x tin cable is going to have 8x amperage. This is a really important concept starting in LV and going throughout the rest of the game. But yeah, we're going to grab a little 2x tin cable. I'm going to shift right click to place this, and then I'm going to place some right here as well. Same thing. When you hold down shift and you have a cable in your hand and you're facing a cable, you get this nice little visualization. So, and you usually want to hit the center right there. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and assume that you've made your first wire mill. Just a bunch of LV motors, 2 LV circuits, LV machine hole. Not too bad. Not too bad. And we're going to place that right there. And I'm going to hold shift while I right click this machine on here. And what happens when you do that is it automatically connects the cable. So if I had not done that, let's say I had not done that, if I just normal right click, that does not connect up. But you can take your wire cutters. In this case, I've got automatic snips. You won't have these yet, but your wire cutters, and you can just right click there. We've got our first machine should be up and running. And what we're going to do is we're going to take some tin ingot, because the first thing you're probably going to make is either red alloy wire, or you're going to make tin wire for more tin cabling, right? So this is basically going to be half the cost, maybe even less than half the cost, because you used to have to use a tin plate, but now you can do this. And if you look at the recipe for tin wire in the wire mill, it is circuit 1. We put a tin ingot there. We get 2 tin wire out, 2 for 1, which is really, really good. So we're going to place that there. And in no time at all, we're going to get our very first ingot. What we're going to do, starting in LV, your single block machines have this really nice item auto output. So you don't have to use hoppers to get the item out anymore or anything like that. So we're going to face the output of the machine. We're going to take our wrench and we're going to right click the bottom here. And I've got a barrel down here because we want it to go down into this barrel. And then we're going to left click item auto output. There's also fluid auto output, which can be very useful. We're going to click that and then boom, there's our tin wire, which is really, really cool. So the barrels came out recently in the latest version of GTNH 2.8, and the barrels are so nice because unlike chests, you can actually open a barrel underneath this. So you can place all these underneath. These are also upgradable. So if we look up barrel, you can make the gold barrel, the iron barrel, the diamond barrel. Now I'm going to show you a trick with the Wiremill. This is really cool. This is actually going to save you some time. You could do program circuit 16. And so what this does, I'll show you in NEI. If we hit U over the tin ingot and we look for the Wiremill, if I can find it, there's so many different tabs here. GTNH in a nutshell, right? This right here, circuit 16, 8 tin ingots equals a 16x tin wire. Now you might be thinking, well, I don't need that much amperage, like I don't want one that big. Well, that's fine, because even though you're probably not going to use that right away, see, it takes a little bit longer, but this is a really nice way to get a bunch of tin wire all at one time. So there we go. We got our 16x tin wire, and then you put it in the crafting grid, you get 16 1x tin wire out, which is really, really cool. You can put 2 together to make 2x. You can put 4 together to make 4x. There's 8x, there's 12x, and then there's 16x. So that is the Wiremill in a nutshell. You'll do copper wire, you'll do red alloy wire, several other things with this. And if you look at the tooltip, only uses 4 EU out of the whole 32 EU that this basic steam turbine is making. 1 LV amp is going to be 32 EU total. And this is really going to come into play later. We're going to explain how this works. But 4 EU, that's like 1/8 of an amp, which is really, really good. The reason the EU count is important is because not only how many amps you're providing to this, but also you're going to have some cable loss with the tin cable. Cable loss matters more at this point in the game than probably any other point in all of GTNH. By the way, if you're enjoying the video, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel, and come watch Cat and I stream every Monday through Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern. We're on all the streaming sites, YouTube, Twitch, and Kick. We hope to see you there. All right, the next thing that we're going to make, the next machine is the bending machine. So normally you use 3 ingots in the forge hammer to get 2 plates. This is going to be a 1-to-1, so it's going to be 1 ingot equals 1 plate, which is really, really nice. So I definitely recommend making the basic bending machine next. So we're going to grab that. The recipe's not too bad. Once again, just 2 circuits. You will have to make your first LV piston, which is not too bad. The small steel gears can be a bit annoying. Take some tools, 2 steel rods, 1 steel plate. It's not the end of the world. When you get to MV, you will be able to make some of these things easier, like the rods and the gears. But for now, you got to still do it this way with the file on the steel ingot and the gear this way. So get your first pistons going, and then you're going to have your first basic bending machine, and then we're going to shift right click that again, and we're going to point that downward toward the barrel, and there we go. And so now, especially when it comes to steel plates, the blessed steel, because you need to be still cranking this out with multiple brick blast furnaces. Hopefully you're doing that. But what we're going to do is going to be a circuit 1. So if I look up, again, so many machines, right? Yeah, circuit 1 is going to be plate. Other common circuits you'll use for the bending machine is circuit 10, which will give you foil. Although you don't really use steel foil, but there'll be other types of foil like copper foil, etc. that you'll use. You need to get in the general habit when you're messing with these machines to make sure that you always check what circuit is active before you try it, because you may end up crafting the wrong thing. It's inevitable. It happens sometimes, but just get in the habit of checking that circuit before you put your item in. And so there we go. We're getting steel plates 1-to-1, which is really, really good. So helpful. You're going to save so many resources this way. So this is definitely the first 2 machines that you want. Now the assembling machine, it unlocks a whole bunch of recipes, and there are so many different circuits. Look at this, 4,499 recipes. But there are a lot of different circuits. Circuit 1, 9, I saw a 2 there. It probably uses the most circuits out of any machine. I saw an 8, there'll be 4, 1, 2, 3, etc. So lots and lots of recipes, very important machine. The first thing that I like to do with my assembling machine, though, is I like to make this right here. Quick and dirty portal generator. It's going to require 1 diamond and 4 of those electronic circuits, those LV circuits. Yeah, so no circuit required for this particular recipe, but you're going to pop both of those in there. It's a 30-second craft, so we can see that that's going. Uses 16 EU per tick, so not too bad on the EU. Again, something that we're going to have to discuss more and worry about more. When we get to the cutting machine in a minute, I will definitely explain that, because that recipe uses a lot of EU. But until then, and we're just making the quick and dirty portal generator. What this does is you actually have a quest in the Thaumcraft page of all things. Now, this doesn't... It unlocks a bunch of Thaumcraft stuff, but there's more than just Thaumcraft to this. This right here, Stuck in the Twilight Forest. Actually, no, it's going to be this right here, Searching for Answers. You make this, and this is going to unlock the Twilight Portal. So normally you just use a diamond, I think, in like most mod packs, but you need to make this instead. And so you make a little 2x2 of water. Make sure that all 12 squares surrounding it have flowers. I believe you have to have all 12. And we throw it in there once we turn off our magnet. And oh, you know what? This actually isn't going to work because we're in the personal dimension. If you're in the overworld, this absolutely will work. And then you'll get a portal to the Twilight Forest that you can jump in, and then you go to the Twilight Forest. Twilight Forest is really important, by the way, because there are some ore veins that are crucial to our progression. And one of those is going to be this ore vein right here. It is the cryolite vein. There's a lot of good stuff here. Cryolite we're going to need in order to get into the LVAge, or the end of LV. Silver ore is really nice so that you can make more of those advanced solar boilers for more steam. Very, very good. Before you were just having to rely on small ores, which, you know, is not really a reliable source. But then you're going to need lead. Lead is going to be really important. And lead is important for a lot of different things. But the most immediate, I think, is Potin. Making Potin pipes. I talked about these before. These have a very high throughput and can also buffer a lot of steam as well, or any fluid that you want to put into it. But Potin is kind of like the meta go-to material for fluid pipes in the future, especially steam. I do recommend making multiple stacks of this. Just churn this stuff out as much as you can, because it's going to make your life a whole lot simpler. If you don't make large Potin pipes for your steam throughput, you actually might end up having throughput issues where you can't get enough steam to enough steam turbines. So if I start putting like 2 steam turbines or 3 or 4, you might start having issues eventually. And speaking of multiple steam turbines, I do want to take a moment to talk about the amperage of the cable and its relation to these steam turbines. So this is your go-to power source initially, and right now we're using 1 steam turbine, but if I use my snips, my wire cutters, there we've got 2. And now you know why I use 2x10 cable. And the reason for that is each one of these steam turbines makes 1 amp of its respective power. So 1 amp of LV. So if I have 2 on here, then we have as much as 2 amps going through. Now, there are some intricacies to talking about this. It's sort of like an on-demand power system in this version of Gregtech. So you can play some shenanigans with the gauge of the cabling. So you might not always need the max, but I do highly recommend just counting the number of steam turbines you have on a power line and just making that gauge of cable. So if I had 4 steam turbines on this one cable, we would need to remove this cable first, and we would need to make it 4x10 cable instead. I'll tell you what happens. If you have too much power flowing through too small of a cable, the cable will catch on fire, and a fire adjacent to a Gregtech machine is likely to blow up said machine. So you're going to have explosions, you're going to have fires. It's going to be a really, really bad time. So I do highly recommend just going ahead and making the higher gauge cable, especially if you can just afford it, but better safe than sorry. Another thing that the assembling machine unlocks are new recipes for a lot of the electronic circuit components. So if you only made like 16, 24 electronic circuits, then maybe you're going to be thankful for that at this point, because now you can make circuit boards, resistors, and vacuum tubes all cheaper. And so as you can see, these are all different circuit recipes. You got this one right here, which is wood plank and copper foil and refined glue. And that makes 8 circuit boards, program circuit 6. So this is much, much more efficient than using all this copper wire, this coated circuit board. Yeah, definitely recommend all of these recipes that I'm about to show you. You've also got the resistor. You can use several different forms of like charcoal dust or coal dust, etc. But you use fine copper wire, refined glue again. By the way, I'm going to show you how to move these fluids around. The refined glue you're going to get from centrifuging slime balls. I think this is Halloween season, so the slime ball looks a little weird right now. But you want to be centrifuging slime. That's going to give you refined glue, which is sort of going to be your go-to for a lot of these circuit component recipes. And so the way you move these fluids around, in fact, let me grab some slime real quick. Let me prep something real quick. I'll be right back. All right, we are back. I went ahead and got a basic centrifuge. It's a little bit expensive on the circuits, but definitely worth it. You're definitely going to want this. So I'm going to place that right there. And then you can either throw the slime balls themselves or congealed green slime if you have the slime trees, which I do highly recommend for rubber and stuff like that. So I'm going to go ahead and throw congealed slime in here. Fluid used to be very difficult to move around in GTNH. It's very simplified now. It's awesome. So there's our first refined glue, which is awesome. So you got two different ways to move the fluid around. One is empty cells. And so the way you make empty cells, by the way, you make an LV extruder and you make this little cell extruder shape, which you can put molten steel in a tinker smeltery. You make the little casting form like this. You make the little cell extruder shape, and then you use 10 ingots. So 2 10 ingots equals 1 empty cell. And what you can do is you can change this cell into a universal fluid cell, which is really cool. And you can go back and forth between them. So I do like to use the universal cell. We can use an empty cell, and then each cell is going to hold 1,000 liters of a fluid. As you can see, it was at 1,400 liters, and now it's at 400 liters. But the nice thing about the universal cell is that it can hold fractions of that. And it'll tell you exactly how much is in the universal cell, which is really, really cool. Something that the empty cell by itself, if I try to left click with the empty cell here, does not work. Cannot move the fluid around like that. And then one other way you can do it is with this large steel fluid cell. These are really nice because they can hold up to 8,000 liters. And they also hold those partial amounts that I mentioned earlier with the universal cell. And so I'm going to grab the 600 liters like so, right? And then what you do is you got the little empty fluid area in the assembling machine, and you could just grab it in your hand, left click, boom. And I believe LV will hold up to 8,000 liters. I think that's right. You got a couple different options. And again, of course, you can just point this here, fluid auto output, and then it's auto outputting into the assembly machine. So you can also do that. But yeah, now that you have this refined glue, you are now able to do this circuit board recipe. It's going to be a circuit 6. By the way, you can hold shift and left click if you want to be precise with clicking on your circuit. But you can also left click and right click to go backwards and forwards. And again, you also have a better recipe for resistor. You also have a better recipe for vacuum freezer, or sorry, vacuum tube. My mistake. Vacuum tube. The problem here is that you need molten red alloy. And I do think it's worth grabbing this molten red alloy because, as you can see, you get 4 as opposed to just molten redstone 2 here. So what I recommend is getting the basic fluid extractor as well. I definitely do think you want this. And so we can grab that. And all you have to do for this is you grab some red alloy ingot, which again, you're able to make in the alloy smelter, copper, redstone. You've already made this before. And you can throw that in there, and then you get your fluid. And then you can move it around the same way that we discussed earlier. And then you can do your vacuum tube recipe as well, which is very nice. Make sure to change the circuit. So this is circuit 5. You're going to be changing circuits a whole lot in these early days. Let me set up a couple more of these areas, these stations, and I'll be right back with you. All right, we are back. I've set up a couple more stations here. You don't have to separate these like this, by the way. You could just have one really long line. I do like to, I don't know, it just helps my brain to have these in different sections. So next thing we're going to do is basic cutting machine. So if we take a look at the quest page here, get back to the old LV quest page. The cutting machine is a little bit tricky because you do need this cobalt brass dust, unfortunately. Let me go ahead and get some of that in my inventory. So basically what this is brass dust, tin dust, and cobalt dust. Now, cobalt dust is a little tricky. So you do get it as a secondary output from things like centrifuging nickel, impure nickel. So you can grab nickel, which is also from the Twilight Forest. Also impure copper dust. You basically put this into your newly made centrifuge, and it's 11.11% chance. So a bit annoying, but again, as you can see with the cobalt brass dust recipe, you only need a little bit of this, so it's actually not too bad. And brass dust is pretty simple. It is just copper dust and zinc dust. Now, zinc dust is a little bit of a thing as well. So the main way you're going to get zinc dust is probably from sphalerite. And sphalerite you're going to find in the nether from a sulfur vein. Now, I don't recommend processing all your sphalerite immediately because you are going to need this for a very specific reason involving the blast furnace a little bit later. Make sure you save your crushed sphalerite ore, but you can use a little bit of it, and you can actually smelt it directly into zinc ingots, and then you could just macerate or grind this down into the zinc dust. So you make that, and then you need to make a cobalt brass gear. And this involves cobalt brass rods and cobalt plates. And shape crafting is basically your only recourse here. And then you put small piles of diamond dust, which you can just make from a single pile of diamond dust. Hopefully you've gotten that. You can grind down, macerate down a diamond for this. And then you finally make your basic cutting machine, LV circuits, LV conveyor belt. There's that diamond saw blade, motor, cable. Not too bad. Not too bad once you get to that point. This is going to be a perfect demonstration of cable loss. So we've got one turbine here, and we've got one X10 cable. So this makes 32 EU. And if we look at the 1x10 cable over here, if you look toward the bottom, it says loss per meter per amp, 1 EU. And per meter means per block. So each time one of those LV amps travels over this cable, it loses 1 EU. So it becomes 31 EU here, 30 here, 29, 28, etc. So let's say that I put this cutting machine right here at the end of the line. So this is only getting 28 EU, I believe. And let's say we want to make some diamond plates, because that's the main reason that you make this cutting machine, right? Is for diamond plates. And you're going to use those diamond plates for probably diamond barrels more than anything else initially. And if we look at the recipe for the diamond plate, by the way, it is a cutting machine. You can use lubricant, which actually cuts down the processing time a good bit. But you might not have lubricant yet, so water. Water is going to be your recourse. And 768 seconds. Some things in GTNH are like this. Not everything is like this, don't worry. But yeah, this can be a bit alarming if you're not expecting to see this. Also, 30 EU per tick. And that's where our cable loss comes in. Like I said, we're only getting 28 EU here because of the one cable loss per block. So if I try to do this, put the water and the diamond block in here, it's going to start, as you can see at the top there, in progress, 6 seconds. It's going to go for a little while. Oh, and there we go. Status insufficient energy. And so you'll see a little red exclamation mark, and there it's trying again, but it's going to fail again. It's not going to get to the whole 768 seconds. So don't worry, because it's starting again, your craft is not voided. You've not lost your diamond block. However, you know, if you try to break and move the machine, then you definitely will lose that diamond block. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this cabling here, and I'm going to add another turbine. So let's get some 2x10 cable, like so. Make sure we connect up everything. And so here's something interesting, is even though there's a significant amount of loss, that second amp is going to make up for the loss that you're incurring on the first amp as well. So we're probably getting somewhere in the neighborhood of 56, 57 EU total to this point. So even though the cable loss here is happening, like I said, the second amp will make up for the first amp. So this craft actually will complete. You know, ideally I move this turbine a little bit closer so that we have a little bit more efficiency going here. But now this will work. I'm not going to stand here and wait for the 768 seconds, but you get the idea. You'll eventually get your diamond plates, get your diamond barrels, and then you will be good. So earlier I mentioned that lubricant can be used for the cutting machine. You're going to need lubricant as well for your electronic blast furnace when you get to that point. And we will cover that, don't worry. So going ahead and making lubricant is probably a good idea. The way you're going to make lubricant is there's a couple different methods. I'm going to use the distillery method. So, you know, you're probably making creosote oil from coke ovens. You can use circuit 24 in a distillery. Put your creosote oil in there, and then you'll get lubricant, which is really nice. The other method is a brewery. So you can actually get creosote, get a little bit of talc, which you can actually find in the overworld from a soapstone vein. So you might have found this already. And this is very fast, right? 6.4 seconds for 750 liters, which is really, really good. As opposed to the distillery, which is almost a full second, 16 ticks out of 20 ticks per second. Or how much do you get? 8 liters. So 8 liters versus 750 liters. So distillery, if you set it and forget it, you have it going for a long time, distillery definitely works. Brewery is really good though. The problem with the brewery is that you need a brewing stand. And brewing stand is aluminium, which you don't have yet, from Thaumcraft. So really the only way to get this brewery in LV, I believe you can find this in the roguelike dungeons, which are those dungeons that have a staircase going underground to them. You'll find the staircase inside of like an abandoned castle tower or a brick house. There's several different types of spawns of that. You might have found that in the overworld already. The roguelike dungeon is very dangerous, I will admit. And it's in one of those, I believe it's in one of those hidden rooms on the side. So you have to like break some bookcases or some blocks in one of the hallways. But you can find this if you are brave enough, right? But right now, I'm just going to make basic distillery, right? We're going to do that. We're going to find some creosote oil. I'm just going to cheat some in real quick. We'll pop that there and then circuit 24. And boom, there we go. And now we're making some lubricant. So if you get this going early enough, you'll be in good shape. You'll have enough lubricant. You don't need a ton of this early game, but you do need this to make the LV energy hatch for the EBF, the electronic blast furnace. So we'll be getting to that in just a second. Another thing that you can make at this point is a basic polarizer. And this is nice because it will make your magnetized rods. So you're having to use like iron magnetized rods, eventually steel magnetized rods. But yeah, polarizer is really nice because then you don't have to use redstone to make your magnetized iron rods anymore. And this doesn't actually use any circuits. So it's pretty cheap to make, actually. There we go. Yeah, so at the cost of just energy, you're making magnetic iron rod, which is fantastic. All right, we are back. And I'm in the Multiblock goals section of the quest book right now. You can click the quest lines button. And it's down here, a little bit below the tiered voltage ages. And multi-block goals is where you're going to find EBF-Time. This is a sort of quintessential multi-block. It's going to be your first real Gregtech multi-block that you make. And you're going to use the EBF throughout much of the game. And you're going to get a lot of different ingot types by this method. But what I want to do is I want to prep you for getting this. So we're not going to make this quite yet. We will a little bit later in the video. But there's this right here. And we're going to skip to this. We're going to make a toolbox and we're going to get a soldering iron. Because while there are workarounds to this initially, I do highly recommend going for the soldering iron, going ahead and getting through it. You will thank yourself later. And what that's going to require is a lithium battery. Let's see, it's going to be this recipe right here, small lithium battery. And what we're going for, if I type in steel, this is the best way to look for this recipe, is you're going to type in soldering iron in NEI. You're going to look for the LV variant. You're going to click on it. And then you're going to go to this little search bar right here because there's 37 different pages right here. So let's find the one that we want to make. You can use a bunch of different materials here, rhodium, things that you don't have yet. So hit the search bar, type in steel, and then that's going to reduce this to 7 pages. By the way, if you don't know about the search bar, this is very useful in a lot of instances when you're looking for the right recipe. And then we're going to go to the last page. So we're going to go backward to page 7. And it's this very last one right here. And so it uses a screwdriver, a file, a small lithium battery, iron rod, steel bolt, and then you can just use a normal rubber sheet. And so that's the recipe you want. So be sure to favorite that. Add that to your pin list. And we're going to go down this road to getting that lithium battery. So what you need to do, go back to the LV page, and we're going to go down this right here. So the first thing you're going to do is the tetrahedrite stibnite copper quest. So you're going to go to the nether. You're going to need to find a tetrahedrite vein. They do appear pretty high in the world, so it's a little bit awkward to find. But if you put some copper in your ore finder wand, put like a crushed copper or something like that in your ore finder wand, and you should be able to find it eventually. And these have great returns for copper, by the way. The tetrahedrite itself will smelt into copper, and you get so much of this. So I definitely recommend the tetrahedrite vein just for copper alone. But what we're looking for in particular is the stibnite. Which is going to give us antimony. By the way, you also need lead to make the battery. You should have already gotten lead from, from making Potin and getting that lead vein. It's called a cryolite vein inside of the Twilight Forest. So you should already have lead, but you need antimony. And the way you get antimony is simply by taking your crushed stibnite or impure stibnite, stibnite dust, whichever, and you can smelt it directly into antimony, which is fantastic. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at the small battery hull. So that is the next quest here, small battery alloy quest. We're going to make small battery hulls and want you to make 5. And we're going to use this recipe right here with the tin cable and the battery alloy plate. The way you make battery alloy ingots is with lead ingot and antimony. So a 4-to-1 ratio is going to give you 5 ingots. The other part is a bit painful, and that is getting your lithium. What you need to find is a salt vein in the overworld. You're going to be looking for salt vein right here. They're relatively common. And what you're looking for is this lepidolite or the spodumene. Spodumene? Not sure how to pronounce that. But you could use both of these to get lithium. And it's a bit painful. So if I look at my pins here, you could take impure piles of lepidolite dust. The way you're going to get that is through macerating the crushed ore. And then that's going to give you impure piles. And then you're going to put that in your centrifuge. And then that's going to give you lepidolite dust and an 11% chance for lithium dust. By the way, ignore the macerator secondary output. Until you get an HV macerator, the secondary outputs from macerators do not occur. So LV, MV macerator, your steam grinder, none of these will give you secondary outputs, unfortunately. So we do have to hone in on this impure pile of lepidolite dust being centrifuged and giving you your lithium dust. Now, you don't need a lot. Initially, you're only going to need 2 dust. By the way, just a note about quests. You do not need to fully complete this quest page before you move on to MV. You just need to kind of have these main parts prepared. If you are a completionist, then go for it. It could be a lot of fun. There are a couple quests that I wouldn't recommend trying to complete, like the LPG quest, the butane propane. It is very painful. Trust me, I've done it. I've done it in LV. Do not recommend. But, have fun. Explore it as well. But if you're feeling overwhelmed, then we're trying to take you through the main beats. But you take your lithium dust, you take your small battery hull. You're going to need a basic canning machine in order to make the final product. So you're going to take the battery hull, lithium dust inside of a basic canning machine. It's going to give you your lithium battery. So let's go ahead and make that. And very simple craft, once again, very straightforward. So we're going to go ahead and put that on our line here. There we go. And again, only 2 lithium dust per battery, which is really nice. And you only need 1 battery to make the soldering iron that we're discussing. And there are other batteries. There's sodium battery. I don't recommend making any of those, quite honestly. Just go for the lithium every time. It is definitely worth the trouble. And then what you're going to do, if you've never had an electric tool before, to charge the tool, you're just going to put it in this slot, this power slot right here of any LV machine. And then it will slowly charge up for you. And each time you use this for maintenance, which I'll show you in just a second, it is going to use 10% of that. So the sooner that you can make a higher tier soldering iron, the better, because it does use a lot of power, but it's going to get you by. It's going to get you by here. And so there's a couple other things that we need for maintenance. If that seems like a bit of a weird topic, you'll see it in play once we make the EBF. It's just best to go ahead and have this prepared. Trust me on this one. So we're going to make a toolbox. Toolbox is just bronze casing, chest inside of the assembler. Very, very simple. We're going to grab that. Actually, I already have one made inside of my backpack. And there are several tools that you need in order for maintenance. And the toolbox makes doing maintenance with these tools very easy. And these tools have other uses that'll come in handy. Obviously, you know the wrench use. Soft mallet can stop machines. Hammer can turn on and off the sound muffling in the machine. Crowbar can remove conveyors, pumps, etc. that you put on there. We're going to put the soldering iron in here. And this is every tool that you need in order to do maintenance on your multi-blocks in the future. So you've got a wrench, screwdriver, soft mallet, hammer, and crowbar. And then, of course, the soldering iron. Now, the soldering iron actually does not work unless you put fine soldering alloy wire in here. And this isn't bad. So you just put this in a Wiremill circuit 3. By the way, all fine wire is circuit 3 in the Wiremill, in case you didn't know that. But you just put 1 soldering alloy ingot and you get the fine soldering alloy wire. And the way you make the soldering alloy ingot is you take that antimony you got earlier from the stibnite from the tetrahedrite vein, and it's a 9-to-1 ratio with 10, and you get 10 soldering alloy ingot. So it's relatively cheap. And so now, whenever you have a maintenance hatch and you need to do maintenance on a multi-block, you literally just right click it, or is it left click? I can't remember. We'll find out in a second. But you do that on the maintenance hatch, and then it uses all these tools all at one time. So I highly recommend the toolbox. It's very, very good. The alternate method, just in case you do want to do this and bypass the soldering iron, is you can use this right here, this duct tape, which you're really going to have a difficulty making early on. It is possible, however, and if you need to do maintenance again, you put duct tape on the maintenance hatch. Not ideal. You can go a pretty long way with that if you so choose. And by the way, you do get a little bit of duct tape as a choice reward. Although I do like to get the 3 loop bags instead when you complete the EBF. Best to just get the soldering iron completely out of the way. I do recommend that. All right, it is finally time to make the EBF. EBF-Time. This is difficult to make, difficult to assemble for the first time, difficult to power for the first time if you don't know what you're doing. But if you follow me step by step here, you're going to have no problems whatsoever. So you can find the EBF-Time quest over here in the Multiblock goals. This is a really good summary in the quest page of what you need to make. And if you do want to read, there is a very lengthy guide in the quest page as well, so you can read all of this. But I'm going to show you exactly what is involved. So, first things first, you make your controller, 3 circuits, 3 iron furnace. It's pretty straightforward. This heat-proof machine casing is a bunch of Invar, so Invar frame boxes, which you can make like this or in the assembler. It's the same resource regardless. And then a bunch of Invar plates. Invar is just iron and nickel. So you should be getting nickel from the Twilight Forest by now. You're going to make your blast furnace controller block, and then you're going to make 11 heat-proof casing. This might be overkill, but we'll see how that works out. Then you're going to need to make your first LV input bus, output bus, maintenance hatch, LV muffler hatch. And if you're not playing with pollution, if you're playing with pollution off, which you can do in the Gregtech pollution.cfg config file, it's the first entry at the top of that config. You can just use LV muffler hatches in all your multi-blocks going forward that require a muffler hatch. You don't need to make the higher tier muffler hatch. But if you do use pollution, then it does help with the pollution output, the higher the tier is. Now for a bit of the difficult crafting here. And let's talk about the LV energy hatch first. So this isn't too bad, but this is where the lubricant comes in. So you need 2 lubricant cells per LV energy hatch, and we are going to make 2 of these. So you need 4,000 liters of lubricant, whether you made it with the distillery or the brewery. So you make 2 of these LV energy hatches, and this is the most difficult part by far. Copper nickel coil block. You will need 16 of these, which means that you need 128 copper nickel 2X wire. Now this isn't crazy bad. So the way you're going to make that is Wiremill circuit 2, copper nickel ingot. Copper nickel ingot is just copper and nickel together. So you will need 128 copper nickel ingots total to get this done. Now here's the bad part. Here's the bad part. Mica insulator foil. Now I will go ahead and show you the alternate method. This only applies to the copper nickel coil block. Every coil block going forward in the game, well, to a degree, this actually changed in 2.8, but it's several tiers above this, you cannot use this aluminosilicate wool. But you can do this. Usually you're using nether quartz dust or something like that, and you can find these different sapphire dusts in the Twilight Forest. So you can use this. I do recommend just going ahead, biting the bullet, finding a mica vein. So if we look through this, you're just going to go through the motions. You're going to need several different things. So bending machine on mica insulator sheet, alloy smelter with nether quartz. So if you don't have a forming press yet, you will need to make a forming press as well for this. And this is mica-based pulp and asbestos dust. Asbestos dust you're probably already found in the overworld. That is from a tin vein where you usually find cassiterite. But this mica-based pulp is going to be raw rubber dust, which you're getting from centrifuging slime, and mica dust itself. And that's going to give you mica-based pulp. And so that's going to be circuit 2. Mica dust, this is the hard part, finding the mica vein. You can only find this in the overworld at this point, and it is very rare. The weight on this is 20, which is a significantly lower number than most other veins that you find. You're just going to have to go through it. If you happen to have some cassiterite ore, not the cassiterite sand, but the cassiterite crushed ore, you could put that in your ore finder wand and maybe get lucky. But you're going to need a lot of this mica ore going forward, so I do recommend that. By the way, I think I did skip something. I can go ahead and show this right now, but it is the basic chemical reactor. This is a really good block. This might be like your 5th or 6th machine. I do highly recommend this one. That is, if I go to the LV section, it is right over here. This is a much easier way to make rubber. What you do is you take your raw rubber dust that you're getting from centrifuging the slime, and then you take sulfur dust that you're getting from the nether. You put that in here, like so, and it's 9 raw rubber dust to 1 sulfur dust. And outside on the other side, you get molten rubber. And so what you can do with molten rubber is you can transfer it to an assembly machine, and you put your 10 wire, any gauge is fine, circuit 24. And this is very universal. So this will work with copper wire, making copper cable. It basically coats your wire and makes cables. This is going to be a much more efficient use than trying to make the rubber sheets directly in the alloy smelter. I do highly, highly recommend getting this done. Yeah, forgot to mention that earlier. I'm going to show you how to hook this thing up, how to assemble this. It's a very picky multi-block. One thing is the muffler hatch has to go in the top center. That is the only place that the muffler hatch can go. You can ignore the input hatch and output hatch for now. There are some niche case uses for this where you'll need these, but you actually don't need these in order to operate the EBF. What you need is that output bus and the input bus. By the way, when you look at this, so if you look at the recipe for the EBF and you click on this multi-block structure, it does show you this. This can be useful. However, I would not take this as gospel because it does not show you the only placement for things. This sometimes can be outright wrong in what it shows you. But it can kind of give you a general idea of what the multi-block is supposed to look like. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and place my energy hatches here because I want them in like a very specific location. And by the way, I did not mention this before, but in order to power this thing, you're going to need, if you're going to use steam, which we didn't even get into other things like light fuel that you could use in a combustion engine, which might be a better power source. But in order to get this running, you're going to need 4 basic steam turbines because you need 4 amps of LV to do any of these basic EBF recipes, which sounds very overwhelming. You know, it's going to be a lot of circuits, a lot of crafting, etc. You know, just a little bit of a warning there. And we'll place more of these in just a second, but I just wanted to go ahead and get that out of the way. But before we go any further, make sure you make 4 basic steam turbines for 4 amps of LV energy. And I'll show you how to hook that up in just a second. But we're going to place it's a 3x3 on this first layer. We're just going to place our LV energy hatches like so. We're going to go ahead and place our controller block right here in the middle. And then I like to put the maintenance hatch maybe over here. It's nice to be able to access it. And then I'm going to do input bus on the left, output bus on the right. So left to right, left input, right output. And then it's just a matter of filling out the rest of this layer with the heat-proof machine casing. So I think you're going to need, for the way we're assembling this, you need 8 on the top layer and then you need 3 down here. So the 11 actually pans out very well. Next is the copper nickel coil blocks. You're going to use 8 per layer. You're going to leave the center hollow. So 2 hollow blocks in the center of this machine. And there's our 2 layers. That's 16 copper nickel coil. And then you should have 8 heat-proof machine casing left. We put all these down. And then we put our muffler hatch down in the center top layer like that. And it should form. So you should see the muffler hatch kind of blend in like that. And if we look at the tooltip, if you've done this correctly, when you look at the tooltip, it will not say in red letters incomplete structure. So if you've done this wrong, next to has problems, that's normal, by the way, it will say incomplete structure. So if I take away this block, for example, update structure, incomplete structure. That's what happens when you've done something wrong. But if we put that back, update the structure, click this button right here in the GUI, and there we go, has problems. Now has problems means that you need to do maintenance. And that's why we did all of that prep before with the toolbox, the soldering iron, everything to get this done. So yeah, you just hold the toolbox in your hand, you right click the maintenance hatch, and you should see your arm move a little bit, and boom, it says running fine, which is awesome. And so what we're going to do, you can leave voiding mode here. You can leave all these buttons the way they are right now. This is all fine. Keep the power switch off for now. If I turn it on, it's going to be green. But just leave that off for now while we work on the power to get this going. And this is the other part that can be quite painful if you don't know what you're doing the first time. So especially with steam, because steam is a very it's not a very dense energy source. So you need a lot of steam throughput. I believe these huge Potin fluid pipes should be enough for 4 steam turbines, but it'll be a good demonstration if they're not, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some 2X tin cable. For your playthrough, I would recommend the 4X because again, we're going to do 4 steam turbines. which is 4 amps, right? So I'm going to put this 2X cable, which is capable of 2 amps, and we're going to shift right click so it connects up to these energy hatches. And then we're going to connect these up to these basic steam turbines. And make sure that these do not connect with each other. That is the key if you're going to use 2X. You know, if you're afraid of accidentally connecting them, that is why I recommend the 4X. But then what we're going to do is we're going to place 2 more steam turbines like that. And then we are going to need to connect up some steam to them. First thing I'm going to do is point the output downward toward the cable like this. And we can go ahead and take our wire cutters and connect that as well. And so there we go. We got 2 groups of 2 amps, basically, for a total of 4 amps. And then all we need to do is connect up some steam, like so. By the way, I'm taking some shortcuts, but you know, do your due diligence and shutter your pipes. You're gonna have a better time, TPS wise. And there we go, beautiful. So now our EBF is ready to go. We are ready to rock and roll with this thing, which is very exciting. This is actually one of the more complicated multi-blocks, just because it's very picky about where you place things, especially with the muffler hatch, the Cooper. It's not an easy first multi-block, Gregtech multi-block. So if you've gotten this all correct so far, pat yourself on the back. Done a great job. But now, what are we gonna make? what does this thing do, right? So if you look at the quests here, it wants you to make over here at the top right. We're gonna do a little horseshoe here. So we're gonna start with this quest. We're gonna go to the right, then we're gonna go down here, and ultimately the end of LV is usually designated by this right here, the basic circuit assembler, which is gonna make it's gonna give you the ability to make cheaper circuits. It's gonna be really, really nice, and you're gonna get your first MV circuits while you're at it, which is awesome. So let's go back to this quest right here. You're gonna make a basic electrolyzer. The next quest that opened up is this right here, gallium arsenide crystal. This is vital for making your first MV circuits. You cannot make them without this. And so, if we take a look at the recipe for this, blast furnace, our EBF that we just made, this is how we're going to make our first gallium arsenide crystal. And so what you do is, all you do is put gallium dust and arsenic dust together in that input bus, and then after 60 seconds at MV, Cooper nickel coils, which we do have, you're going to get your gallium arsenide crystal. Now, the reason we're using 4 LV amps, this is a recurring situation with the blast furnace in particular, but more multi-blocks going forward, is we're actually overclocking. We're overclocking to MV. So what that involves is we're taking 4 amps of a lower tier power, LV, and we're mashing them together into 2 energy hatches, each of which is capable of taking 2 amps of its corresponding energy. And we are melding and meshing them into 1 amp of MV. And so that's generally how power works in GTNH and Gregtech in general, is 4 amps of the previous tier equals 1 amp of the new tier. And it keeps going on like that in multiples of 4 as you go forward. Yeah, we need our gallium dust and our arsenic dust to make this crystal. And so how do we get this dust? Well, the way we get the dust, the arsenic dust is not that bad. So you get realgar dust in the nether from small ores randomly. So you've probably found some of this by now. And then what you do is you take that realgar dust and you put it in your centrifuge, and 2 realgar dust gives you a guaranteed 1 arsenic dust. So not too bad, not too bad. The place where you're probably going to struggle more is with the gallium dust. And gallium dust does continue to be a problem for quite a while. There are methods for being able to acquire more gallium dust later on. We're not going to get into that. That's too much for this tutorial. But to get the gallium dust, remember I said hold off on processing all that sphalerite. This is the reason. So 2 sphalerite dust in an electrolyzer gives you zinc, sulfur, a 9.17% chance of gallium. You can get really unlucky and process like half a stack of sphalerite dust and still not get a gallium dust. Hopefully you're luckier than me, because that's happened to me one time. You'll eventually, you brute force it, you eventually get your gallium dust, maybe you get lucky and get a bunch. But you only need 1 to start off with. But this is your main method of getting gallium dust initially. Get some of those dusts, pop them into the input bus. No circuit needed. A lot of times you do need a circuit in the EBF, but you don't need it here. And we're going to click the power switch, and the coils light up. All right, and there we go. Our first EBF craft. Yo, that's awesome. That's awesome. So what you're going to do with this initially I wouldn't recommend doing this all the time because you're going to have other uses for this crystal later. You can actually forge hammer it into small pieces that you'll then use for these silicon bowls later on, which we could technically do now if we went for polyside dust, but I don't want to get into that right now. But that is going to be your future in MV, is you're going to use these crystals largely for these actually. But initially, you're just going to make the dust. So we're just going to throw this into the steam grinder that we made in the SteamAge. By the way, if you're looking for a good steam guide, we did make a guide similar to this one that you're watching now for the SteamAge. So you should be linked at the top right there if you want to check that out. And there we go. We're getting 2 dust out of that, which is great. We're going to make this into small piles, right? So actually, if we look at the quest page, this is what we're going for. We're going for diodes. And this is what you need in order to make your first MV circuits. This recipe right here with fine copper wire, you're going to make some diodes. By the way, I do want to point this out. When you get into MV, there is a coin quest for getting diodes. This is one of my biggest use of the technician coins. So it's at the very bottom of the whole quest category list. And it is this right here. See, it says requires tier 2 MV, which is the first quest in MV. When you make your first MV machine hole, this will unlock. And I think it's every 40 minutes. You can give 5 green technician coins and you get 8 diodes. I recommend doing this as much as possible because the diodes are very expensive and annoying initially to make. So we got our diodes. If we look at the quest book page, there is also this right here that is blocking our MV circuit quest, and that is the empty circuit boards. These are the next tier of circuit board. So, you know, up till this point, you've been making this circuit board right here for LV circuits. You're going to need a better circuit board for MV circuits. So you're going to use this recipe right here with gold wire and a phenolic circuit board. The way you're going to make the phenolic circuit board initially is with an LV assembler recipe, refined glue, and wood pulp, and then gold wire. This is expensive. We are going to get off of this eventually, and you're going to make something called iron 3 chloride once you get to MV. You can do this in LV technically, but it's way better on the gold cost. That's like 1 ingot's worth of gold instead of the other recipe, which is 4 ingots worth of gold. You can make something called a glowstone flower farm and then centrifuge the glowstone into redstone and gold dust. That's beyond the scope of this video. And then that opens up this quest right here. Good electronic circuit. This is going to be your go-to MV circuit for a decent amount of time in the game. There's a shaped crafting recipe you have to do initially. Don't worry, once you get your circuit assembly machine, you're not going to do this recipe anymore. So you'll probably do this once or twice, and that's about it. So you're going to use this shape crafting. There's the diodes. 3 LV circuits, very painful, but it won't be like that for long. Like I said, copper wire, steel casing, pretty simple. So you get your first good electronic circuits, you get that quest done, and then that will open up your basic circuit assembler, which is like the icing on the cake for this. You've come a long way to get to this point, and you're going to reap the rewards because your circuits are going to be way, way cheaper. We'll show that in just a second. So you need 2 MV circuits, 2 of those good electronic circuits. You only have to do the horrible recipe twice. So don't batch craft these this way. You only need 2 of these with this shape crafting recipe. Life is going to be good, and I'll show you why right now. Because your LV and MV circuits both are much, much cheaper. Let's check out the electronic circuit. Before, we were doing this. We had to make the red alloy cable. By the way, there is a red alloy cable coin quest. Speaking of the coin quest, there's one for tin cable as well. Those are very nice coin quests to redeem. I do recommend these. But check this out. With the new circuit assembler, we can actually make stuff this way with 2 red alloy wire, 2 vacuum tubes, 2 resistors, 1 circuit board, right? Which is insane. Now, the other thing that you do need is there's several different things you could do: molten lead, soldering alloy, tin. I do recommend making the soldering alloy. It is worth the trouble. And then we pop everything in there, and there we go. And 10 seconds later, you get a circuit. And this is the go-to method by far. You're going to use a circuit assembler for making circuits from this point forward in the game, basically. And then if we look at the MV circuit, same story, much, much better recipe. Instead of 3 electronic circuits, instead of 3 LV circuits, it's only 2 now. And once you get this, you're in really good shape. But if you're looking to go ahead at this point and try to get into MV, which you can do now, you need to make an MV machine hole, right? And your first MV machine hull is going to be wrought iron, copper. So this is a very like familiar looking recipe, right? But it's aluminium plate. So aluminium is the last hump that we need to get over in order to get to MV. So how do we get aluminium when we're in LV? It's a lot easier to get aluminium once you're in MV and you have your first MV electrolyzer, but until then, it is a bit of a pain. This quest is slightly outdated, but still has some useful information. So if we look at this, circuit 1 in the EBF, raw aluminum, Cooper nickel coils, MV 75 seconds. And then the other method, which I think is the more intended method these days, is this right here. You get 4 aluminum ingots, which is nice, in 80 seconds. So it's actually the time portion of this is very, very nice. So 20 seconds per ingot, really good. You need alumina dust and cryolite. Now cryolite is very easy for you to get. So it's just the Twilight Forest, which you probably have already gotten because you're already going after lead and silver. So you get the cryolite. Now what I recommend when you get the cryolite ore is that you do this processing right here, where you get the impure piles of cryolite dust eventually from the crushed ore, from macerating, and then you put it in the centrifuge. You get an 11% chance for alumina dust. Now, unfortunately, this is kind of a painful way to get your first alumina dust. There are much better ways of getting this pretty soon, but you kind of have to brute force this. Now, thankfully, you can get alumina dust several different other methods, but it's the same thing. You centrifuge certain impure piles. You can just look through these different ores, the sapphire, spudamine, glauconite. I know I'm not pronouncing these correctly, but a lot of these ores that you might have already gathered some of. I will forecast this for you, that there is a much better way of getting the alumina dust eventually, and it is through getting your first MV electrolyzer. So if you brute force and rush your way to your first MV electrolyzer, which is going to be an MV machine hull that's 9 aluminium, and then you're also going to need, if you're going to use steam, it's going to be a lot of steam, but there is an MV steam turbine. There's also a combustion engine for light fuel, other things, etc. But then this is another 9 aluminium. So if I'm doing this correctly, I think that's a total of 18 aluminium. So you might want to save all of your aluminium for your first MV steam turbine and your MV electrolyzer. Because, let me show you why. Clay dust, if you electrolyze this, you get water, which you can just throw away, but you get all these different dusts. And notice that it says MV, so that we do need the MV single block electrolyzer. You get lithium dust. Easy lithium, that's really nice. But 5 alumina dust from 16 clay dust. And so there are actually ways of using like a clay sonia from Botania later on, just to make like an infinite clay farm. However, there are some other ores that you might have gotten, like sodalite from the lapis vein, which is really nice because you can get aluminium dust straight up. Also chlorine, raw silicon is really useful later on for getting your first poly-Si dust. Also lazurite dust will give you a bunch of aluminium as well. Now, the aluminium dust, how do you do that? Well, all you have to do is take aluminium dust in an just LV compressor or steam compressor and put that aluminium dust in there. You get raw aluminium. As we showed earlier, it is going to take longer. So it's longer than the cryolite alumina dust method, but it's straightforward. So you can get raw, and once you get your raw aluminum, you're good to go, right? Just throw in the EBF circuit 1, you're good to go. I will point out one other way to get that aluminium dust before your MV electrolyzer is this right here, mob info. Click on that. Kobolds in the Twilight Forest. You'll find these naturally in caves. They're a pretty regular mob that you encounter. And if we look down here at their loot table, aluminium dust, 37.5%. That's a pretty good percentage. And then also aluminium ingot, 15%. So you might want to just go try and find a bunch of kobolds. And that about does it. You have conquered LV. You can go and check out these other quests, but you can actually move on to MV if you so desire. So this quest page is very, very overwhelming, but just focus on the bigger quests, follow this guide, and then you should have no problems whatsoever. You'll be speeding through LV, gliding through it at your own pace. You should have a good time. And so if this did help you out and you want more tutorials in the future, do subscribe, hit like on the video as well, and we will come back to you with another tutorial very, very soon. Until then, take care.